Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher who stared into the eyes of tyrants and faced his own death with unwavering calm, once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." It is a sentence that sounds simple, almost poetic, until you feel the weight of its truth crushing down on you in the middle of a sleepless night. He was not speaking of physical pain or the hardships of the external world, but of the silent, corrosive betrayal that happens within the architecture of our own minds. There is a specific moment, one that every human being has experienced, where a decision stands before you like a diverging path in a dark wood. You know logically which path leads to growth, to power, and to freedom. You can see the steps clearly in the daylight of your reason, but then the sun sets, the shadows lengthen, a cold grip tightens around your chest and your breath becomes shallow. The decision is no longer a calculation of risk and reward, it becomes a theater of horrors projected by your own biology. This is the moment fear hijacks the cockpit, locks the rational pilot out of the controls, and steers the vessel of your life into the safety of a harbor that you were never meant to stay in. To understand why we sabotage our own futures, we must look at the machinery of this hijacking, not with judgment, but with the cold, clinical eye of a surgeon dissecting a wound. The tragedy of the modern condition is that we are operating with software that has not been updated in 200,000 years. Deep in the primal basement of your brain, the amygdala sits like a vigilant sentry, scanning the horizon for the silhouette of a predator. For your ancestors, a mistake in judgment meant immediate, violent death. If they heard a rustle in the grass and assumed it was the wind when it was actually a tiger, their genetic line ended there. Therefore, nature, in its ruthless efficiency, biased the system toward paranoia. It built a brain that treats every ambiguity as a threat and every unknown as a fatality. But you're not walking through the Pleistocene savanna. You're sitting in an office or looking at an investment portfolio or standing on the precipice of a difficult conversation. The problem is that your body cannot tell the difference. When you consider quitting a soul-crushing job to start a venture, or when you think about investing your savings during a market downturn, your amygdala screams that you are about to be eaten. It floods your system with cortisol, shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the center of logic and long-term planning, and forces you into a state of paralysis. You tell yourself you are being prudent. You tell yourself you are waiting for the right time. But these are lies. You are not waiting. You are hiding. This mechanism of self-deception is the most dangerous aspect of fear-based decision-making. Fear rarely announces itself as fear. If it did, our ego would reject it because we like to see ourselves as brave. Instead, fear disguises itself as wisdom. It masquerades as due diligence. It whispers that you need to do just a little more research, that you need to ask for one more opinion, that the market conditions aren't quite perfect. It creates a labyrinth of logic that always leads to the same center: inaction. This is the phenomenon of analysis paralysis, not born of a lack of intelligence, but of an excess of emotion. You are drowning in data because you are looking for a guarantee that does not exist. You're trying to solve an equation where uncertainty is a variable, and because you cannot eliminate the uncertainty, you refuse to solve the equation at all. Meanwhile, time, the only resource that is truly non-renewable, bleeds away. The opportunity that stood before you withers and dies, and eventually someone else, someone perhaps less intelligent but more ruthless with their own fear, steps in and claims the prize that was meant for you. The bitterness that follows is the taste of your own potential rotting on the vine. Let us dig deeper into the concept of loss aversion, a psychological bias that keeps men small and obedient. Behavioral economists have proven time and again that the pain of losing $100 is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining $100. We are hardwired to protect what we have rather than risk it for what we could become. This applies to money, yes, but it applies even more lethally to identity. You fear losing your reputation, so you never publish your work. You fear losing your comfort, so you never leave your hometown. You fear losing the approval of the herd, so you never speak your true mind. You clutch your existing life so tightly that you strangle the life that is trying to be born. This defensive posture is the default setting of the mediocre. To break free from it requires a Machiavellian ruthlessness directed inward. You must treat your own fear not as a trusted advisor, but as a hostile entity that is trying to sabotage your campaign. You must recognize that the sensation of dread you feel when facing a high-stakes decision is not a stop sign. It is merely a physiological tax that must be paid for the privilege of growth. Consider the great generals and statesmen of history, the figures who moved the world on its axis. Do you believe they did not feel the cold sweat of terror? When Caesar stood at the Rubicon, knowing that crossing it meant civil war and potentially his own execution, his heart did not beat with the slow rhythm of sleep. It likely hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The difference between the great and the forgotten is not the absence of fear, but the relationship to it. The amateur thinks that confidence must come before action. They wait to feel ready. The professional knows that confidence is the result of action. They understand that the brain is a learning machine that only updates its files through experience. If you wait until you are not afraid to make the decision, you will wait until you are in your grave. You must invert the logic. You must act while you are afraid, carrying the fear with you like a heavy rucksack, acknowledging its weight, but refusing to let it determine your direction. This is the only way to rewire the neural pathways. When you force yourself to step into the void and you do not die, the amygdala is forced to recalibrate. It learns that the email is not a tiger. It learns that rejection is not death. There's a powerful technique often attributed to the Stoics called the premeditation of evils, or premeditatio malorum. It is the antidote to vague anxiety. Usually, fear thrives in the shadows of the unknown. It is a monster under the bed that grows larger the less we look at it. The Stoic, however, turns on the light. When you're paralyzed by a decision, instead of trying to think positive, you should do the exact opposite. You should vividly imagine the absolute worst-case scenario. If you make this decision and everything goes wrong, what actually happens? You lose your money, you are embarrassed, you have to move back into a smaller apartment, write it down, look at it. Usually, you will find that the worst-case scenario is uncomfortable, but it is not fatal. It is survivable. Once you define the nightmare, it loses its power to paralyze you. You realize that you have the resilience to handle the wreckage if the ship goes down. And once you accept the worst outcome, you are free to pursue the best one with a lightness of spirit that the fearful man never knows. You stop protecting your ego and start playing the game. We must also confront the social dimension of this paralysis, the fear of the other. We are social primates, terrified of exile. A massive portion of our indecision stems from a subconscious simulation of what our peers will think. We run a mental movie where we fail, and we hear the laughter or the judgment of the crowd. But this, too, is a delusion of grandeur. The brutal truth, one that is both humbling and liberating, is that nobody is thinking about you as much as you are thinking about yourself. The crowd is not watching your movie. They are starring in their own, paralyzed by their own fears, obsessed with their own insecurities. They are too busy worrying about their own survival to catalog your failures. The they you're afraid of is a phantom, a projection of your own inner critic. To let this phantom dictate your critical decisions is to voluntarily enter a prison cell and lock the door from the inside. You are handing the pen of your life story to an audience that isn't even watching. Ultimately, the cost of letting fear hijack your decisions is not just a lost opportunity. It is the erosion of the self. Every time you bow to fear, every time you choose the safe path when your soul screams for the dangerous one, a small part of you dies. You teach your brain that you are not to be trusted. You weaken the muscle of your will. Over years and decades, this accumulation of retreats creates a life that looks respectable on the surface but feels hollow in the center. You wake up one day and realize you are living a life designed by your anxieties, not your ambitions. You're safe, yes, you are comfortable perhaps, but you are not alive. The ultimate risk is not in taking the leap. The ultimate risk is standing still while the world moves on without you. So how do we reclaim the cockpit? How do we wrestle the controls back from the ancient lizard brain? It begins with a pause. When the panic rises, when the urgency to do something safe floods your veins, you must physically stop. Breathe. Recognize the chemical surge for what it is, biology, not destiny. Name the fear. Say to yourself, I'm feeling a desire to flee because my brain perceives a threat to my status. By naming it, you detach from it. You become the observer of the fear, rather than the victim of it. Then, ask the critical question, if I knew I could not fail, what would I do? The answer to that question is your true north. That is the direction you must move, not recklessly, but strategically. You acknowledge the risks, you mitigate them where you can, and then you march forward into the fog. You accept that clarity is a luxury you cannot afford. You accept that your hands might shake, but you move, because in the final analysis, life is not a preservation project. It is not about arriving at the grave with a perfectly preserved, unscarred body and a mind that never took a risk. It is a process of expenditure. You are meant to be used up. You are meant to burn. The fear you feel is simply the friction of your potential rubbing against the resistance of the world. Do not let it stop you. Let it sharpen you. Do not let the ghost of a saber-toothed tiger keep you from building the empire, the family, or the masterpiece you are capable of. The door is open. The pilot's seat is waiting. The only thing standing between you and the life you want is the story you keep telling yourself about why you can't have it. Stop telling that story, cross the Rubicon, and never look back.